Welcome back everyone to another episode of Big Red's Isopods. This week we're going to be taking a look at one of my species, Cubaris red tiger. So before further ado, let's get into it. Alright everyone, so this here is my culture of Cubaris red tigers. This is a species that I've had for a little bit now, and if you've been following the channel, you do know quite a bit about these guys. They started out with beautiful species, by the way, but they started out with just a culture of 6 isopods, which actually dwindled down quite a bit, and now I finally got their numbers back up to where they need to be to have a proper culture of isopods. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of a care guide about these today. One thing I'm definitely going to mention is do not be going into your container like this and rummaging around to kind of stir up your isopods. You kind of want to leave them alone as much as possible. In this video I am going to be taking a look at them just to kind of show you guys the isopod themselves, why they're kind of liked in the hobby. They're an isopod that you kind of want to have if you like to collect isopods. Wouldn't suggest using it for a bioactive setup, which I'll go over later, but that's what we're going to take a look at here. So when it comes to care for Cubaris red tiger, the one thing I want to start off about is that they are a Cubaris species, so they are going to need their moisture in their container. It doesn't have to be too high of a moisture gradient. These ones in particular for a Cubaris species don't mind it a little bit dry. They tend to be alright if you have a little bit of a drier climate. Although all isopods are crustaceans and they all do need moisture, so I do have a decent amount of gradient here. Take a look here, you can see that they're breeding, so you know that they're happy. You see the little monkai running around there. So we know that they're doing well. Another thing you want to remember is that Cubaris species always love a lot of protein, so you want to make sure that they always have protein in their diet. That's what I use my fish food for. There is a decent amount in here, so we are going to give them a decent amount of food here. But then you also want to make sure that they have a option to have vegetables as well in their diet. For this week, I'm going to be giving them a little bit of broccoli. I don't want to be giving them too much because I don't know if they're going to eat it all, but this little piece should be plenty enough for all these guys. Actually, you know what, I'm just going to split off some of it here. That'll be more than enough for them for a week, and I'll keep this other one for another culture. Another thing that you want to make sure is that you really have to leave them alone, okay? You can't be bugging these species. I found that my biggest problem with any of the Cubaris species is handling them too much. They like to be left alone and kind of do their own thing. If you don't leave them alone, it's going to cause troubles and you're not going to have as much breeding as you would prefer. Now, any isopod, you're going to want to leave them alone for a couple months, but these ones, you might want to leave them alone for a little bit extra before you check in there or do anything. Just water them down every week or whenever you do your water cycle, depending on when you feel they're drying out or whatnot. It all depends on where you live. I have mine in a relatively warm environment, so I like to do a once a week watering. Some of you might want to do twice a week, depending on if it's more of a dry climate than a moist climate or a humid climate. But as you can see, these isopods are doing very well. There's lots of monkai in here. You can see them running around now that I've sprayed in here. They're all getting a drink, getting themselves all liquefied. Keep their gills going properly. They're coming out of the soil to have a bite of something to eat, so they're happy and healthy isopods. When it comes to any isopod, you don't want to move them up in container size too quick. So there is monkai in here, they are breeding, but it's definitely going to be a couple months before I move them to a larger container so that they can breed more with more space. They need to get their numbers up higher in here. There is a couple dozen in here, but it definitely needs to be up higher before I transfer them over into another container. For the Other side of using isopods as a cleanup crew, I do not suggest using red tigers as a cleanup crew for isopods. They are definitely more of an expensive species to buy. They are definitely more likely to die out on you than other species. But if you're using them as a hobbyist purpose, like if you just love having isopods, you like the coolest isopods, this is definitely a cool isopod that you could grab and have in your home to add to your collection. Definitely a gorgeous isopod. You can see there's some that have the really bright orange, like that one there. Some of them they got some darker colors, but they all tend to have this orangish skirt around them, which just makes them a fabulous isopod to have in the hobby. Let me take one more peek under here before we go. Yeah, definitely a gorgeous isopod. Another thing to keep in mind about these isopods is that they always need somewhere to get up off the ground. Same with a lot of other species, but Cubaris especially, they do prefer to be up off the ground. I'm sure the Monkai like to rummage around in the soil, as you can see down there, but a lot of the adults want to be up off the ground. So that's something key to remember as well. And the same with all isopods, you do want to make sure that you have leaf litter in the container at all times for them to eat at. You won't want it to get too high so they can escape, but you do want them to have lots of leaf litter in there for them to munch on, especially the Monkai and whatnot. And if it does get a little bit dry, you can give it a spritz down, but they'll have no problem eating that, even though it's as dry as it is. So in conclusion, guys, Cubaris red tiger is a great species to have if you're a hobbyist and you want this isopod in your collection, but I do not think that it's a great isopod to use for any sort of bioactive setup, due to the fact that they're a relatively pricey isopod. The numbers have gone down now since a lot of people have isopods now, and the prices aren't as high as they used to be. A lot more people are breeding these in North America, so they're not as expensive as they once were, but still they are relatively pricey. And whatever animal you're going to put them with, whether it's going to be any amphibian or any reptile, it's probably going to end up eating these isopods. Unless this reptile doesn't eat insects, then maybe you could use these if you wanted something like that. If you had some sort of only vegetarian reptile or amphibian, which I don't think there's very many of those out there. Maybe a reptile, but I don't think there's any amphibians out there that are strictly vegetarian. They're definitely going to eat these guys up, and it's quite an expensive meal. I'm sure they're going to love it, but your bank account might not. So that's all I got for you guys this week. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you all again next week. All right.